Is it possible to learn Blender using Chat GPT? At least I know that it knows the tradition of deleting the default cube. And there has already been a lot of buzz surrounding Chat GPT, and I'm personally very impressed with its capabilities. However, today we will be taking a different approach. Rather than reading articles or watching tutorials on Blender, we'll be using Chat GPT as our personal instructor to guide us through the basics and possibly assign some challenging tasks as well. So we'll see if Chat GPT is up to the task. So on the left side, I have Chat GPT open, and on the right, I have a window of Blender. And before I begin, I'm just going to establish myself as a complete beginner to Chat GPT so that it knows the context well. I'm just simply going to type, I'm complete absolute beginner with Blender and have just started learning it. Could you take me through its basic interface and give a run through of what I see on the screen? So first thing I would like to know is what exactly am I seeing when I open Blender? So this is my first question, and I've established that I'm absolute beginner. So as an absolute beginner, the Blender interface can seem overwhelming at first, but with a little guidance, you can find your way around it. So the number one thing is the 3D viewport. This is where you'll see your 3D scene, and you can use your mouse to orbit around the scene, zoom in and out, pan left to right and stuff. The toolbar is located on the left side, which is here. That's right. The property panel is on the right side. This is located on the right hand side of the interface and contains settings properties for the selected object, which is correct as well. The timeline is at the bottom, and outliner is located at the top right, which is absolutely right. Now the info window is located at the top of the interface and display right here, and the header is at the topmost part of the interface. Yeah, that's right as well. So as you work with Blender, you find these areas and work and interface are highly customizable, and you can adjust them to suit your workflow. Don't hesitate to explore the interface and experiment with different layouts. So I hope this helps. Yeah, this definitely helps. Now the next thing I'm curious about is, could you teach me basic commands? How do I navigate, add basic objects? Also some essential useful commands. So let's see. Here are some basic commands to help you. So the first thing is obviously the navigation. To orbit around, use the middle mouse button, which is correct. Zoom in and out with the scroll. Pan left and right pressing the hold and shift key, which is correct as well. I can confirm that most of these commands are pretty accurate. To add mesh objects such as sphere, cylinder and all, you press shift A, and from the mesh menu, you can bring any object, which is correct. To select an object, right click on an object. To move an object, press G, and rotate with R, S with scale, which is right. Now these are basic commands, and if you want ChatGPT to elaborate on certain point, you can do that. Now what we'll do is ask ChatGPT to teach us the transformation in more effective way. Is there a way to use transformations and basic keys more effectively, or are there any more shortcuts or hotkeys speed up the process? So let's see if it can elaborate, because I know these are not everything about rotation and the basic transformation. So yes, there are several ways to transform using transformation keys more effectively in Blender. Use the axis keys. When transforming an object, moving, rotating, or scaling, you can constrain the transformation to a specific axis by pressing X, Y, or Z. So X, Y, and Z, that's actually correct. And use the duplicate command. Instead of creating a new object and then moving to the desired location, you can use the duplicate command to create copy of an existing object by pressing shift D, and use snapping tool. You can activate the snapping tool by pressing shift plus tab, and then you can choose the type of snapping you want to use, such as vertex, edge, or face. Now let's see if it snaps. That's right. So pretty accurate. And now what we're going to do is, let's say if you are absolute beginner and you would like to practice a few of the basic commands. The next thing I'm going to ask ChatGPT is to print out all the essential commands. It could be about modeling, the basic navigation. Please make a detailed list of all the commands, hotkeys for all the commands necessary, including transformation, selection, modeling commands. Now ChatGPT is going to make an possibly pretty detailed list. Then you can have few specific lists as well, like one related to the shader editor, one related to modeling, and then one about rendering. Here you can see it's adding more commands like N to open the properties panel, and T to toggle on and off the the shelves and all that, and control up arrow, down arrow to minimize, maximize active panel, control U to save preferences, control alt Q to, yeah, that's right. So these are navigating the windows and all that. Then there are selection commands, transformation. So without you having to visiting multiple websites or forums, you can do all that here. So at least for basics, it has been accurate so far. But since there is so much hype around it, maybe there is much more to it than what we already know that exists on internet. So let's say if I wanted to model a specific object, but before that we need to learn how to model a thing in Blender. So let's find out. How do I modify the shape of an object? To modify the shape of an object, you can use variety of modeling tools. Here are some of the most commonly used tools. Edit mode. Switch to the edit by pressing tab and select the top from the mod selector at the top left, and then you can manipulate vertices, edges and faces of an object in various ways. There is extrude, bevel, this and that. So it's going to probably write down most of the essential commands for modeling. Now let's say you entered edit mode and it's not obvious to a beginner that there are different kind of components and different kind of selections like vertices, edges, and although the Chat GPT have mentioned it here, but we would still like to know a few more details about it. So you can maybe ask GPT to elaborate more on point number 1. Please elaborate more about point 1, edit mode. Edit mode is mode in Blender that allows you to manipulate geometry of an object in more detail. In edit mode, you can select individual vertices, edges, or faces. To switch to edit mode, press tab key and or click on the mod selector on the left, which is right here. Now here's a quick overview of some of the basic tools and actions. Selecting geometry. To select individual vertices, edges, or faces on an object, simply click on them. And to select multiple elements, you can hold down the shift key, which is right, and moving, rotating, and scaling. Once you've selected geometry, you can move, rotate, and scale by pressing G, R, and S. Adding or removing geometry. You can add a new geometry to the object by using extrude tool, bevel tool. You can also remove geometry by selecting it and pressing X or delete. Subdividing it, cutting geometry, which is correct as well. Then we can also ask, are there some useful shortcut, useful hotkeys for edit mode? So then probably it's going to mention a few essential hotkeys. Now these are some essential commands like E to extrude, F to create a face, Control R to add some edge loops, Control B for bevel, Alt M to merge the selected vertices. What about hotkeys for different selection modes? Vertex select mode. This allows you to select individual vertex, and you can press one key and this enters the vertex select mode. You can press 2 for the edge select mode, and you can press 3 for the face select mode. As you start using Blender and following on the conversation we are having with Chat GPT, if it didn't make any certain thing clear, you can pursue that further and you can reference that whichever point number or whichever keyword commands it mentioned here, and then you can ask more details about it, and it's going to reference all the previous conversation we have been having with it, and give you an answer without you having to spoon feeding it with long sentences. So that's right. Now we can go to the edit mode, move this around. We know how the different selection modes work, and there are a few commands which are Control R, bevel, this and that, mentioned by ChatGPT, which I can confirm are actually accurate. Now you can also ask ChatGPT to give you a detailed description about each of the tool, which is there in the toolbar when you are in edit mode. But we are not actually going to do all that. Instead, let's make something specific. So far we have been just going through basic interface and commands. Now what if I wanted to make a certain shape or model something and give it some particular shader? So let's say I would like to model a teapot. Make a detailed step-by-step guide mentioning hotkeys for each part of model. That should do. So we can also ask, for now let's just focus on modeling part so that it doesn't get into any of the shading and all that. Sometimes it does. So if I do that, let's see and hope that we get something which is actually usable. So start by opening Blender and creating a new project file. Delete the default queue by selecting and pressing an X key. Switch to the front view by pressing 1. And in the front, add circle mesh by pressing Shift A, and mesh circle we are adding here. All right, so then switch, and then in the circle option, make sure there are 32 vertices, which is fine. Enter edit mode by pressing the tab key and select all the vertices by pressing A and extrude the circle up on the z-axis, which is right. And now press S to scale the extruded vertices inwards, which is right as well. Now with the teapot still selected, add a new circle mesh as before. Circle. I think we can add a circle here. And in the option panel, set vertices to 32, which is already there. Enter edit mode and select all vertices and extrude the circle in z-axis. Press S to scale outwards. Now move the mouse to adjust the scale until the selected shape resembles a teapot. Let's see. I think something like this it meant. This resembles a teapot, right? Now you can press Ctrl J to join these both of the meshes, which is right. And after that, you can create a spout by adding a cylinder mesh. Let's say if we add one mesh and a cylinder, enter edit mode and select the bottom face of the cylinder, extrude the face outwards. Enter edit mode, select the bottom face, extrude the face outwards on X axis, and then scale it down Z axis to form the spout. I'm not quite sure what it meant, so I hope it's trying to figure out the form of teapot. So it's doing something which kind of looks like a teapot, but we are going to use some of the common sense here and not really overburden this cute little AI. And then output on and position the spout in correct location on a teapot body, then join it to selected by pressing Ctrl J. Now to create a handle, add a new circle mesh and do the following. In edit mode, extrude the circle outwards on x-axis. Let's say we extrude this outwards on x-axis. Use the S and G command to shape the handle in desired shape. All right, so let's do that. I think I would like this to be something. I think I would like this to be something like this, right? So now here, it didn't really mention that extrude it multiple times to form the shape of the handle, so it skipped few parts. Now if we want, we can force it to regenerate a response which matches our need. But first, let's just finish with whatever bit of common sense we got here. This does look like teapot, but it's not really the best shape we got. So now I would ask, how do I make base round? To make the base round, you can use the proportional editing feature in Blender. Enter the edit mode by pressing tab key and then select all the vertices at the bottom. So this is not exactly what we want to do. So let's ask Chat GPT. The shape of teapot still looks quite flat. I would like to make it more round. And then last bit, let's hope extrude and scale. You can also use extrude and scale command in edit mode and add more details and refine the shape of the teapot. For example, you can select the top of the teapot and extrude it inwards and scale the new vertices to create a lid. Similarly, you can select the spout and handle and extrude them outwards. So I think that's one of the way. This is interesting. I think what it meant is that instead of making one extrusion, you can make multiple extrusions. What if I ask ChatGPT, can I add more geometry in the body? Yes, you can add more geometry in the body of the teapot. Enter edit mode by pressing tab key, select the faces and edges you want to add more geometry to, such as, and then press subdivide. And the other way it mentioned here is you can use the loop cut command. In the edit mode, press Ctrl R and add loop cuts. Now we can use this command and the other command which it mentioned earlier about using the proportional editing tool to shape the keys, shape the teapot. Then I need to ask, top lid is open. How do I fill the gap? In edit mode, by pressing the tab key, select all the edges and then press F key, and it's going to fill the command. Can I add some round edges on lid? So I'm just trying to follow the instructions, and whatever need arrives based on that, I'm asking the next question. So as you can see, it's kind of helping in few ways, considering it's an AI and it's trying its best actually. So select the edges you want to round off on the lid and press Ctrl B. So let's select these edges, press Ctrl B. You can use the mouse scroll wheel to adjust the segments. That's right, actually. So same thing I'm going to do here since I've learned it now. And then using a bit of common sense, I can use the same thing here as well. And now I'm not actually planning to make a perfect teapot here, and just trying whatever is the best coming out of the conversation we are having with this chatbot. Now the bottom part is missing. We can do the same thing, fill here and do the bevel, and let's extrude this. So we have a teapot, right? I mean, a bit of help from here and a bit of improvisation. Now the teapot looks all faceted and it doesn't really look. So what do I do? Let's find out. To make the teapot look smooth and remove the faceted appearance, you can use the Blender subdivision surface. We can use subdivision surface. So it's also mentioning that in the object data properties, there's auto smooth. So it's having difficulty finding the smooth shading option. It's actually here in object. I think it should be shade smooth. Bit of misinformation here. I hope it can improve in the future. Now the last thing I would like to do is make the spout look better. End of the spout is close. How do I open it? So I'm just trying to ask as many questions as possible, considering these won't be obvious to any of the new beginners. So you can select the faces at the end of the spout, right click on them, press E and extrude them. So E and extrude this, press S to scale the faces. And once you have desired shape, give the end of the spout thickness by extruding the faces again. Yeah, I think I'll have to extrude this inwards. Although it missed the point, I'm just trying to improvise a little. One last question I would like to ask before we jump on the shading part. The body and lid looks one, it's unibody. How do I make separation in shape? Let's see. To create a separation between the lid and body, you can use the following. Switch to the edit mode by pressing tab key. Switch to the edit mode, select the vertices where you want the separation to begin by right clicking on them, and press E to extrude the selected. So we would like the lid to be here, and move the extrude vertices along the Z axis by pressing Z. I think press escape and then move the extruded axis along the Z to create desired separation. So although this is creating separation, I think moving it along the normals would have been a better solution. It's not bad, right? It's fine, I guess. So there are quite a few things missing in the commands here. For an absolute beginner, it could be a problem. So anything which is missing, or you find that you're not able to follow the instruction correctly, you can ask Chat GPT to elaborate more on that topic. So let's say if I want to scale down the handle, and but the problem is I don't know how to select the entire handle. I would like to scale down the handle. So let's say if it knows how to select the linked objects. Now you can switch to the object mode by pressing the tab key, right click on the handle to select it. You can select and then press the S key to, no, that's not actually right. Is there a way to select only the handle faces in the entire teapot combined geometry? Yeah, so now it suggests the L key. Switch to the edit mode. I think I was being a bit casual about the question I was asking. So switch to the edit mode and press L key to select the faces of the handle. which is correct. Now I can scale it down. So congratulations, this is not really a hopeless AI. So now what we would like to do is add some material. So let's first assign a material. How do I add material or shader to this teapot? I would like to make it earthen looking teapot. Now to add an earthen material to your teapot, you can follow these steps. Select the teapot and go to the material properties, which is right here, and you can open the panel by pressing N. Strange, there are no material properties here. I think it's referring to the older version maybe. So click on the new button to create a new material, but we already have a material, and add a principal BSDF shader. So in the shader network, let's bring the shader network here, add a principal BSDF node, but that's there by default. Adjust the material to create the earthen material. You can adjust the color, roughness, material, metallic parameters to achieve the desired look. To add texture to the base material, you can add an image texture node and connect it to the base color, which is right. But for now, we are just going to give it some brown color. And to see the changes in 3D viewport, switch to the material preview or render mode. So I think this is the viewport shading material preview. And know that there are so many ways you can create an earthen material in Blender. So that's fine. Now let's say I would like to add some realistic lighting. How do I add realistic lighting to the scene? To add realistic lighting to your scene, you can use HDRI, high dynamic range image. So now here it says go to the world properties. Let's go to world properties. You click on the use nodes. Let's click on the use nodes, and in the shader editor, select the world node. So I think what it meant is from the object mode, go to the world network, and add an environment texture by pressing Shift A and selecting the texture, environment texture, and click on the open button to select the HDRI. So that much we figured out. Now connect the color output to the environment texture and adjust the strength setting and all that. How do I preview the render in viewport? To preview your render in viewport, you can use the viewport shading, which is this one. Make sure you're in object mode or edit mode in 3D viewport. In the top right corner 3D viewport, set the icon viewport shading, and once you are in material preview mode, you should see the object and basic lighting, this and that. So that we are seeing here. You can use the render button at the top right corner of the 3D viewport to render high quality, which is right here. I can ask more questions here, but let's switch to the cycle render. So we have a render based on the cycles render. Now a few more things I would like to ask is, suggest me few settings to render it faster in cycles. I have low configurations. If you don't need high resolution image, you can set the resolution in lower volume, this to reduce time, which is fine. Reduce the number of samples in the render settings. I think this what it meant. So I've set it to 24. Use CPU instead of GPU if your computer has lower end graphic card, but my computer have high end graphic card, so I think I can use GPU. Use the denoiser. Click on the denoiser. Use simplify settings. How do I add camera and add depth of field? To add camera and depth of field to your scene and create bokeh, switch to the camera view by pressing 0. I don't have a camera. Add camera to your scene by pressing Shift A. Now switch to camera view by pressing 0. Adjust the focal length of this camera properties, this and that from here. Turn on the depth of field to control where the focus is. Select the object where you select the object in your scene that you want to focus on. In the camera properties, use object, focus object, this one. So from here I can use the 001 and render by pressing F12. Now my scene became dark. As a complete beginner, I wouldn't know this, so let's find out. When I added camera, my scene became darker, absolute black. What went wrong? So I hope I'm not giving it a hard time, and but I would like to put myself in shoes of absolute beginner and see how much it can actually help you troubleshooting problems, because most of the time I get these questions in the comment section. So make sure the camera is selected in 3D viewport. Go to object data properties in the property editor, the one with the with the camera icon. All right, under the viewport display, select the camera display viewport display. From here, this is enabled. Switch to camera view by pressing 0. Adjust the camera location rotation until you get the desired framing. If it looks dark, try adjusting the exposure. Can I adjust the camera view from viewport itself interactively? Suggest me something different. This is not a right solution. Yeah, so here it's suggesting that I should press N key and from the property panel, click on the view tab and lock camera. So this is a much better solution. And this is what I meant to ask before. So I have depth of field, I have render preview, and I think everything looks fantastic. Now we have a pretty good looking object. Now the next thing I would like to add here is a liquid simulation. Place my teapot here like this. Now what I would like to do is pour the tea from here. And so let's jump to Chat GPT and ask how do I make liquid simulation in Blender 3D. Now creating a liquid simulation in Blender 3D involves several steps. Here's a general guide. Create a domain object. The domain object is a container that holds the liquid up, and to create a domain object, press Shift A and create a mesh cube. Let's bring a cube here, add a fluid simulation with the domain object selected. Go to the physics tab. We are in the physics tab, and in the properties panel, and add a fluid. So let's click on the fluid, choose the type of fluid settings you want. Yeah, this will add fluid simulation to domain object. So this is a domain object. I think it missed a bit of a step here. It should have mentioned that from the drop down should select the domain, but we are going to cut some slack. So choose the type of fluid. In the fluid setting, you can choose the type of fluid you want simulate, such as liquid, gas, this and that. So we want liquid from here. Now adjust the simulation settings. There are many simulations. Now create an emitter. Now an emitter object is that releases the fluid into the domain. To create an emitter, create a cube. So let's say if the tea is pouring out from this part, I'll add an emitter here and scale it down like this. These won't be obvious to a beginner, but just try and go with your common sense and gut feeling. All right, and if you want, you can actually ask Chat GPT to elaborate more on an emitter. Then set the emitter as fluid object. Go to the physics properties, choose fluid, and select inflow object. So let's say inflow or outflow. So I believe this is going to be flow, right? And liquid. So I'm just improvising a bit. I think these might be a slightly outdated, probably from the previous liquid simulator or something, but the keywords resemble. So I'm just guessing from the keywords here. Now adjust the emitter setting in the fluid settings, and you can bake the simulation once you have set up the simulation. How do I do that? To do this, go to the physics tab. Now, although I have set up the simulation here, there are quite a few more questions I would like to ask Chat GPT, like how to make a mesh, how to add other things like maybe velocity, this and that. I'm pretty sure it's going to figure out if I keep feeding it with more accurate questions and queries. Let's ask one more question. How do I create mesh for simulation? Liquid simulation, I just created. To create mesh for liquid simulation, just create in Blender. You can select the domain object, and in the modifier tab of the properties panel, click on convert button mesh. That's not actually what I want. Stop generating, regenerate response. To create a solid mesh preview of liquid pouring out in the simulation, you can use the mesh option in the fluid settings. Yeah, this one is right. So select the domain object which contains the liquid in 3D view. In the properties panel of the physics, click on the mesh option. Click on the mesh option, and this is going to add mesh. That's right. So see, we have tea pouring out, and we can increase the resolution slightly. All right, so last thing, I have a glass object. Can I make the liquid fall in the glass? Yes, you can make the liquid fall into glass in Blender simulation. Here's create a glass object. We have a glass object, and make sure the glass object is solid and closed mesh. Create a liquid simulation as described earlier using inflow object to create falling liquid. Position the inflow object above the glass, or we can position the glass below our simulation. In the physics properties, glass object, enable the fluid setting and set the object type to obstacle. So fluid obstacle. So we don't have an obstacle. Okay, so instead what we can do is I don't have obstacle option. Only options which are there in fluid modifier is domain, flow, and the third one is effector. Which one should I use for glass for it to collide with fluid? You can use the effector option in the fluid simulation settings and create an object that will act as a collision. Holy, fine. So this works. This should work. So now let's run the simulation, and this should collect our liquid. Congratulations. So quite interesting that Chat GPT was able to figure out this much, although we had to put a lot of efforts. Actually, it's both ways. We are trying to understand the pattern, the ways in AI understand. Sometimes my questions were a bit casual and sometimes I had to be a bit more descriptive, but other times the database which is there in the Chat GPT is a bit outdated. So you'll have to sort of figure out how you communicate with Chat GPT. Let's say if you're talking to an actual person, then you can share information back and forth like what we did just now, telling Chat GPT that we don't have a collision option, we have only this option, and this seems slightly different than your response. So in that ways, it might be able to pick up and provide you a better solution. There's still a pretty good chance that you can use Chat GPT to troubleshoot most of the stuff that beginners struggle with, and instead of having to search plenty of forums or websites for a simple solution, you can actually ask a pretty complex question here in this Chat GPT window, and there's a pretty good chance that you'll get a response which is usable. So as you have witnessed here, although I've been trying to not fill in the gaps in between whatever information it missed, but I'm pretty sure if you're absolute beginner, you'll have a slightly difficult time and you would miss out on a few things which might not be obvious to absolute beginner. So don't worry, if you are actually a beginner and you just start learning Blender, I have a perfect series for you. Just jump to this playlist. So don't worry about missing out on any of the information which could be necessary for absolute beginner. This course is structured pretty well for absolute beginners, and also you'll get the feeling that I'm an actual human sitting in some other part of the world who knows Blender, is actually helping you out and is going to respond to your comment if you get stuck at some point of time. So I got you back. All right, so don't worry, but give it a try. It's pretty fun and it's pretty interesting what it can do, and yeah, as a creative I would encourage you to take advantage of it. Now in the next video we're going to do a slightly different things with the Chat GPT from an animation filmmaking point of view. What all you can ask Chat GPT to produce, to write, to fix, and there are quite a few interesting things I would like to share. So let me know your thoughts. So jump to chat.openai.com and sign up for Chat GPT. And it's not a promotion or anything, I'm just sharing this because I think it's pretty fascinating. And if you happen to successfully make whatever it instructs, then do let me know comments below what it was, and you can also jump to our Discord server, share whatever you have made. So I'll see you guys in the next chapter. Take care. Bye.